Well, my name is Young. My name is Young Moon, and I've done my MDiv at Fuller Theological Seminary, and I'm currently the director for the Korean American Ministry for Compassion International. And previously, I worked at various churches around, Southland and other parts of United States, as well as in Korea. And that's so much for me. I think it's more about what I do, and I work with Compassion International. I think I just want to begin by explaining the logo, and we have this logo right here. The story goes that we were always called Compassion almost from the beginning, and the name itself is very, good. Who can say anything about compassion? One day we were approached by a very, influential and also, rich or whatnot, corporation, entity, or person or whatnot. And they said, you know what, we really like the work that you do. You guys are honest, you guys are effective, blah, 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 blah. We want to give you, assist you as much as you would like for us to do. And everybody's happy about that when you're a mission organization. But then there's a catch. They say, well, you guys are a little bit too Christian. If you can tone it down a little bit, just a notch, then whatever it is that you want, you could get it, kind of thing. So the board met together, and the story goes in a few minutes they came back and said, you know what? Basically no. And they included the thing up at the top and the bottom. It says, releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. And for Compassion, there is no question as to what it is that we do and what it is for, or for what that we do what we do. So that's who we are, Compassion International. It began in 1952. Everett Swanson, we can't really talk anything about it until we go in 1952. Korea was going through tough time, war orphans everywhere. Everett Swanson, a Baptist preacher from Chicago, had been out in Korea to minister to the GIs that were there, baptizing them, preaching to them, and so forth. And while he was there, he walked the streets, prayed, and things like that. And every morning across the street from where he was at, or lodging, he would see this big truck, heaped with trash, going from the city to the outside of the city. And he just kind of wondered, this is wartime, why would they have so much trash? Where is this trash coming from? One day, he was out there and just happened that the truck stopped on the other side of the street. And then the driver got out, the person on the other side got out, and they saw a trash, something covered with gurney or something like that. So they went and they just kicked at it. And then they grabbed both sides, the trash, and then tossed it onto the truck. And as the trash was going on, over or towards the truck, inside the truck, he saw an arm, what looked like an arm sticking out as the trash was airborne. Frantic and just what's going on? And he ran over there, stopped the truck because he couldn't speak Korean. He says stop. He blocked the car. And then he jumped on the bed of the truck just wondering, hey, there's what's going on? And as he looked down, what he thought was trash was not trash at all. There were the dead bodies of the children that had died the previous night. You see, they didn't have any places to go, and so they would find these gurneys or whatever it might be, and they would just cover themselves and they would sleep on the streets or wherever. And in the morning, when these workers came by and they kicked them, and if you moved, they're still alive. If you didn't, you weren't. And these children had died from hunger or cold, whichever it might be. And thus began the ministry of Compassion, because he came back telling his church in Chicago, there's this country called Korea. The war is there. The children are dying by the thousands and thousands. And in 1952, as he began to go back and forth since 52 to bring back funds and build orphanages and programs and things like that. And by about 1954, and 2 years later, we began a one-on-one sponsorship. One person would provide monetary help that would be able to house a child, in Korea, to be able to be fed or admitted into the orphanages and so forth, and began that ministry in 1954. And then, by 1993, after 100,000 Korean children that had been helped, and they basically pulled out at that point, because if you guys know the history of Korea, by 93, Korea had become fairly well-to-do enough country. I mean, there were still people that were struggling, kids who were, starving and things like that, but it became a nation where they can take care of themselves, sort of like the country can take care of itself. And also, they didn't really want all that stigma of as they were trying to advance and move into the advanced nation, they didn't want to have that, the shadow of, being helped by, the foreign nations or the orphans and things like that. So they basically says, no, thank you. So Compassion pulled out at that point. But at that meeting, or that last meeting, pastors and orphanage directors and people who had been helped, all those graduates, they gathered together, what might look like this kind of a ballroom or whatnot, and basically said to Compassion, thank you so much for all the work that you have done, the kids that you have saved, the hope that you had given. But they said, please come back. Our parents know the grace of God that had been with their generation, that brought them out of the war and saved and helped them and so forth. Our generation knows what Koreans would call the miracle of Han River. But our children, they do not know any of this. You need to come back and remind our children, tell them of our history so that they will be able to give back and so forth. And at that time, Compassion basically says, well, that's great that you guys have the heart and all that stuff, but basically they just didn't think that Korea can pull it off, or Compassion Korea could pull off, because, all of this can only be done through I guess you could say, the culture of giving. But Korea at that time had no culture of giving. They gave to church, yes, but to an outside organization, it was just unheard of. Nothing of that existed. Maybe for Salvation Army at that time, but nothing really existed. So Compassion basically said, I don't think so. But they kept on asking, they kept on approaching. So by 2003, 10 years later, Compassion agreed to come back, and thus was born Compassion Korea. Not as a recipient nation anymore, but now as a sponsor nation. And it joined the ranks of US, Canada, England, Australia, and so forth, to begin to help others. And the funny story is, actually, Korea became the 10th nation to join the ranks of the sponsoring nations. But the funny thing is, actually, Germany, now when we think of Germany, the powerhouse, right, economic powerhouse, we would think that they would have been there all along, but no, they were actually preparing and was to become the 10th nation. But somehow Korea came like all of a sudden, and they became the 10th nation. Then Germany became the 11th nation. And the 12th nation now are the Nordic, the Scandinavian. They're joined together because the population is quite small, but together as the Nordic nations, because they actually have the highest in the world, the philanthropic or giving, the nature or so forth. So anyway, they are the 12th nation. So Korea joined together. And the interesting thing is, the one of Korea is always about 빨리 빨리. If you know anything about Korea, it's 빨리 빨리. It's like hurry up, rapido, that kind of thing. So right now we're sponsoring about 220. I'm sorry, I wrote that wrong. I did it very late last night because I was told that we're doing this YouTube live. It's not 220,000. It's 2.2 million children right now. So I'm off by 2 million, sponsoring 2.2 million children in 27 different countries. 2 new countries were added recently around the end of COVID. One is in Malawi, and the other one is in Myanmar. Myanmar. So, and if you look at the yellow, that is the sponsor nation. And then if you look at the blue and so forth, you can't really see them all. But that's not, that's the recipient nations. Anyway, our core value, the 4 things that you can understand or easily understandable. One is Christ-centered. As I told you earlier about the logo, that is not compromisable. That's who we stand for. That's who we are. And so everything is about Christ. Number 2 is church-based. We do everything, all of our ministry, over the years of doing it for the past 70 years, we have come to realize that church is the answer. And there's nothing outside that church. So all the ministry that we do for the children in the field is directly tied to, connected together with the church, the local church. And thirdly, it's child focus. And it goes along with what Pastor Kim has said earlier about 414 window. We're right alongside with what the movement that he's doing, because that's what we do. We understand that children have the greatest potential of what it could be. And that's where we want to invest our resources, our time, and our efforts. And lastly, since you're trying to do the C's, we just kind of couldn't come up with the other one, and we said committed to integrity, because we didn't have the word integrity in C. So committed to integrity. We want to honor what God has given to us, what people have entrusted to us, and we do everything that we can to make sure that it is used not only wisely, effectively, but honestly as well. Now, although there are, usually I don't say this when there are non-Koreans, ethnically non-Koreans here, but since you guys are honorary Koreans, I will say this. You know, about this committed to integrity, Koreans had a lot to do with compassion becoming very, very, with integrity. We had supported, in a sense, or contributed, that's the word I'm looking for, contributed tremendous, and this is what happened. In the earlier days of ministry in Korea, compassion, millions of dollars have poured in. Now, you can imagine during the wartime, I mean, crazy, right? Well, millions and millions and millions in gifts and all that stuff had come in. Well, a lot of times the directors, the pastors, whatever, each individuals or together with whatever, they were just so good and like just kind of, putting into their own pockets, and the money would disappear or things would disappear. And, you would give, like the president would come from like the US or whatever, and they would bring it to the kid, and then they would take a picture, and then they would take it, and then they would go to Dongdaemun and they would sell it off. I mean, this was just so rampant. I heard the story actually from a third director of Compassion. His name is Wally Erickson. He has since gone to be with the Lord. But I met him about 8 years ago in nearby Colorado, in Denver, near there. And when he found out, or when he heard that I was Korean, he was like so excited. He said, because he had lived there and he had worked there and so forth. And he says, all of a sudden, he goes, wait. Do you know this song? And I said, what? He says, 소방차. I said, 소방차? What is that? What he really wanted is 송아지. But he couldn't remember. Oh, looks like, oh yeah, I remember. I know that song. That's how it's supposed to be. And he tells me the story, and this is what he said. He says when he was there, when he first began as a director, he went there. His family had not come to Korea yet. And he was there about 6 months early, and he toured all the orphanages and all the places that they were housing the kids. And he waited, woke up early in the morning, and those times Korea had a curfew. 5 o'clock in the morning, he would wait, and then he would pounce into the wherever the place that would be. And then he would go and count the numbers of the children that are sleeping there, and the toothbrushes or whatever it might be. Because on paper, it's supposed to be, let's say, 50 or 70 or 30. But when he goes there and counts it, there are only 15 kids sleeping or 25 kids. And so it went on and on and on. And they cleaned it up. They try to make it better, right, new rules, guidelines. And they said the Koreans were so smart, like mikuraji, like, those fishes, just squirm out of the way. And they had to find a new way to make it more secure, more safe, more integrity. And thus was born compassion with integrity. So this is how we Koreans have contributed. Okay, anyway, so who we are, I told you about 4 C's. Basically, our ministry philosophy, we believe in what we call the inside out, okay? We realize over the years that we can do a lot of things outside, externally, like community development and relief and all that stuff. They're important, they're needed, they need to be done, and we still do them. We dig wells, we put roads or whatever, all of those, we do them. However, they're not our main focus. If it endangers the child's life, or the situations and so forth, we will engage. However, if it's muddy, if it's dirty, we hope it can get better, but that's not the focus because we have a greater resource, greater needs at hand. So what we believe is that if we begin to change the inside of a child, and if that child begins to change holistically, then he or she will begin to impact their parents and their lives and the bigger families around them and also the community. So what they have seen is that when the community gets developed and the road comes in and the people begin to have jobs and have money and so forth, but their inside is not changed, the end is that money or that wealth or that jobs or whatever it may be begin to be used for ill purposes, whether it be gambling or drinking or other things. So what we realize that the inside needs to be changed. And that's why we focus to bring the kids to church, local church, at least 6 to 8 hours of gathering at local church, whether it be twice a week, 3 times a week, or once a week, whatever it may be. Kids within 30 minutes of walking distance from the church. The reason is, if they're too far away, they can't come. If they can't come, we don't go around just giving out stuff. If they don't come, they cannot be helped. They cannot worship together. They cannot gather together for small groups. They cannot praise together. And as a result, so 6 to 8 hours a week, they come together for a time of learning, growing, worshiping, memorizing verses. If they're a little bit older, they begin to learn skills, computer skills, the hair, like, what do you call it? Cosmetology, sewing, mechanic, cooking, making furniture, all kind, you name it, they have it. And they're doing it so that they can give children some sort of a tool so when they go out, they will begin to have a jobs or be able to apply it towards their skills in finding jobs or doing their work. And some of those who are skilled in studying, we provide them ways to go to college, or what they have learned as a baker, they can get a job and also at the same time go to school. Inside out is what we believe needs to be done. So as I kind of wrap up, and it seems like a lot of the Korean ministries is, we kind of go back towards North Korea. When Compassion pulled out in '93, it was basically, we're done. Our work in Korea was done or is done. But I guess you could say 50 years afterwards, we're basically saying, no, the work in Korea is not done. We still, maybe the South Korea, but we still have the biggest work that's left, and that's North Korea. So ever since Compassion Korea began in 2003, a few years later, we began pitching for North Korea. But the problem is, as we all know, that there's very little that we can do, because especially with Compassion, we have to be present. We have to have a church, not, wielded by government, but the church that profess the name of Jesus, that have a heart and ministry for children. But we know that we don't have that in North Korea, at least not yet. And every time something seems to be happening, maybe things are getting better, and then they shoot a missile, and they shoot a missile here. And so things were really tough. So what we began to do, we know that when North Korea opens up, when God opens the door, we know that all the churches in South Korea and United States and Canada and all the diaspora Koreans, they'll be rushing into North Korea, Pyongyang and everywhere. And every street corner is going to be, Youngnak Church, Onnuri Church, Hyungjae Church and all that stuff. There's going to be that. We know that. They have plans. The denominations have plans for all of that. But we're wondering, for us, it's not about planning churches, but compassion, we're saying, but when they go there, do they have programs for children? Because adults, you can preach to adults and things like that, but for children ministry, you need people who are trained. You need many people, but North Korea doesn't have believers who are either trained or have the resource to help children. So we're saying, we're going to do that. When Onnuri or Youngnak or whomever, when they plant churches, we're going to come alongside with them to support them to do children ministry. And so what we have begun to do, since we can't go in there, we begin to call upon the local churches in South Korea and so forth, begin to say, hey, come. We will show you exactly what we're doing in the Philippines, in Malawi, in Honduras and Dominican Republic, in the Tanzania. We will show you exactly how they are caring for their children. You give us 10 of your staff, 10 of your 집사님s or deacons or church members who are committed for North Korea. You bring them and we will teach them, we will show them how they can take care of at least 200 children. We will show you how you can replicate this ministry so that you can go on and do the same thing in North Korea in your church, right alongside as you plant those churches. You can go there with your church and begin to roll out your program and help, because we, on the compassion other side, we will find sponsors for those children. We will find those sponsors for the children that will be in North Korea, because it'll be millions. But we will work together with all the nations around the world to find children. You become the workers who will be the boots on the ground, basically. And so that's what we've been doing. We have already the curriculums that the children in Korea, North Korea can understand in their language, so to speak. It's the same Korean, but it's so different in a sense. And we already have the curriculums created by the publishing company in South Korea, working together with North Koreans, and it's all done, it's ready. But we were waiting and waiting and waiting. It seems like we're the bride, who are waiting for the grooms to come, but the groom isn't coming yet, kind of thing. Well, North Korea isn't opening up soon. And it gets tiring. Well, let me just go back a little bit. It's that kind of a thing. So what we begin to do is now we're beginning to do of some of those things actually in South Korea right now, piloting with some of the churches that have been working together with us for a long time, implementing that program on Saturdays for the children that are about, first or maybe a little younger to only up to about third or fourth grade, because anything beyond that or any grades beyond that, kids are too busy in Korea. So they're doing that right now, and the results have been fantastic. And the kids are loving it, the parents are loving it, and we're hoping that this will continue to grow, and when the time comes, that we can see it happening. So North Korea is something that we are looking forward to. How the churches here in the U.S. or in Korea or elsewhere can, you can ask maybe questions about what we call the Compassion Sunday. It's a day where we present it to the congregation, what compassion is, how we work, what we do, and how you can become involved together with helping a child, releasing them from poverty in Jesus' name. And the project-based giving, whether it be you want to just give $1,000 or $10, or you want to give $1 million, it doesn't matter. But you could do that. There's also a church planting concept where churches in the field that have been working together with compassion are now growing up. They're being, they're making impact in their community, and they're planting churches on their own. But as they're planting churches, they realize, we don't have anything there. It's like, it's like we're just starting cold. But if we can start a compassion program in that new town when we do the church plan, then we're all of a sudden going to have 150 or maybe 200 children who are coming to church for the program, but their parents are going to be the object of our witnessing, our sharing, and soon they will begin to, or be able to come to church. So that's what we're doing as well. And some church, there's one church in LA called Living Hope Church. It's a second-gen Korean American church. They joined that together, and they have actually planted a church in Honduras, and they've been going back every year doing missions work together along with them. And that's the lasting missions, because many Korean churches come join together by doing this, going to a specific either country or area, and there building a lasting relationship with that church. One church in New York called New Frontier Church, they had targeted Uganda. Long story short, for next 3 or so years until COVID, we timed it together with the local church in Uganda who have annual outreaches. And during that week, we come alongside together with them, and as they do their witnessing in their surrounding towns, we also provide foreigners coming to provide children ministry and other kinds of leadership trainings and so forth to enhance and work. Because, what can we do? We don't really speak the language, but we can come alongside to do all that it is that the church might need or support, and also the children ministry as foreigners that would also draw the crowd. And so that's the kind of work, the mission work that we become involved as you support children who are in need. So that's the gist of it. I think I'm just a little bit over. Any questions, perhaps? Okay. All right.
I'll stay there. My awesome introduction was cut short and it wasn't recorded, so I'd like to introduce our speaker.
Hey!
We met in college, and I can't believe we're sharing the podium together. So he's working with Compassion. He started out in Compassion Korea, but is in Compassion USA. I was in Korea a couple of weeks ago and actually heard as a recipient country that converted into donor country, now it's number 2 in the world. They sponsor 130,000 plus out of 2.2 million, which is phenomenal. And a good friend, Justin Seok, began their work in Korea, and he said still the record to be broken at Compassion World is in one Sunday at Onnuri Church in Korea, 6,000 sponsorship in one day.
Amen.
And that just blew all the Compassion record in its history. So I think being part of that pali, quickly works favorably sometimes. So we have about, I would say, 15 minutes Q&A. So if you have a question, you could raise. And as an MC, I would like to raise a question. We learn about 414 window and how it applies, and even GSM about one-on-one sponsorship.
Yeah.
It's very similar to what has, so can you kind of say something about that?
Sure, okay. I had an opportunity to meet Reverend Kim just earlier and just introduce myself. I met him before about 5 or 6 years ago when our then, the CEO, Wes Stafford, had gone and speak at his church. I don't know the timeline in terms of, but hearing it today, I see that his work of 414 had been there quite long. But as you can see, the Compassion had begun without understanding of 414 or so forth. We just basically knew, hey, you know what, we need to focus on children. And so when that 414 movement came along with Louis Bush and Pastor Reverend Kim, it just kind of like, they just hand in glove kind of thing. They were just tight. And so Reverend Kim just told me that he had just traveled recently with Wes Stafford, who's now emeritus, to Africa and things like that. I think they're working together in different capacities, but their heart is knitted together because they know that that's where the future is, because that's where the changes will really happen. So in that sense, I think 414 is really the next thing that we really need to focus on. I mean, geographically, 1040 is still viable and it needs to be done and so forth, but at the same time, we have to understand that, hey, children is where the next thing is. But then the next question was, wait, I just lost the train of thought. Next question was, along with that was 414.
One-on-one sponsorship.
Oh, one-on-one
how is it?
sponsorship. Yeah, again, with that one, I don't know who began that thing or whatnot, and I don't want to go into that kind of like, ooh, who did this or we did this. But it's basically, it's all different. When they say one-on-one, what does it really mean? And depending on the organizations and so forth, it may not really be the same. For us, what one-on-one means is that there's a one sponsor and one child. Because I think in the past, in some other organizations or whatnot, maybe they thought it was, but actually with one photo, they could have 20 different sponsors giving it to the same child. Or they thought that was their child, but it was not. So maybe in the field, there's not really that many kids, but again, you are like that kind of thing. Maybe that's what it is, but it's one child, one sponsor to a child, and they're having that relationship. Now, that has changed a little bit in Korea, and the reason for it is with all the economic situations in Korea, it was really hard, because equivalently for us is $38 a month. But in Korea, with the currency thing, it's about 45,000 won, which translates, it's pretty high. It's pretty high for Koreans. And so it was very, very difficult for them to sponsor a child by themselves. So they have recently come, it's one-on-two kind of thing where they can help together to sponsor this one child because they want to do it, but they don't have enough. So, but I think maybe one-on-one, that's about what I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the floor?
Yep, I'll be right over there if you have any more questions. Oh, yeah. India, very good question. Unfortunately, about 3 or 4 years ago, when the new, I guess you could say, regime had come in, we were kicked out along with many other organizations at that time. India was by far the largest, at that time even, it was about 140,000 children that were being helped. But they would stop our finances. They would not allow us to disperse and so forth. And it just went on and on and on. And we kept on, working together with them, try to reason. We even got the State Department to get involved and all that stuff. But long story short, it was like no go. They just would not allow. So we had to pull out. We're still hoping and praying, perhaps that God will allow us to come back. But the good news about that is, as I told you, that we work with local churches. So local churches who have a vision, it's not like we just go around and find any churches. They themselves have to have the vision for children. So what happened is that after we worked with them for some like 20 years, 10 years, or whatever, we pulled out. No more money was coming in. However, for the church, these children are their children. They're in their neighborhood within 30-minute walking distance. So what we have heard since then, it's been about 4 or 5 years now, many of those churches are continuing the work that had been done. Not in the way that we were able to do because they had the finances. They would not be able to provide the things that maybe that we had provided. But nevertheless, caring for the children are still being done. Why? Because it is their children. And they still have the vision, money or no money. So yeah, that's where India is. Any questions? Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a very good question. That is our...
I'm sorry, can you repeat the questions?
Yeah, I think what he was saying is, we work with churches, but like in the context of like Muslim countries, socialist countries, and some of the other countries, what do we do? How do we do this? Is that right? Okay, that's a very good question. I get asked about that a lot. Well, the simple answer is we don't have anything, not directly. We can't because we don't like hide and says, oh, well, no, we're not doing anything Christian. And then in the slide that we do, no, we don't do that. So we have no official programs or anything like that there. Having said that, we do provide, either resources and other kinds of assistance in the countries that either request or want, but we cannot physically, as an organization, be there. So like we are doing that some places in China, through the Ministry of Compassion Ministry in Thailand, which has a very strong program and so forth. We will work through and work together with, but we are not there officially. We're not sending any money in that way. And because we are not able to go in social or like say Muslim countries, that is our weakness in the sense of the word. However, we also believe that there are many other wonderful, viable, awesome organizations that do those work very well. And so basically, we will concentrate on things that we are good at and that we feel the best at. And then we also hope that God will continue to use other organizations for the same work that needs to be done. But yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Let's give a round of applause one more time for him. Thank you. Yes.